Relax, the keyboard is off, the press box is closed, and the mic is just getting warmed up as the guardian of the blue paint turned writer is about to enlighten us. The show where the writer is fresh off the presses and the ink is not dry. For this week's show, special guest Isaiah from O&B PuckCast joins the show. Welcome to the Hockey Writers Inc. Join Lance and Steel as we bring you all the latest on the Flyers. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of the Hockey Writers Inc. And holy smokes, Batman! We got Isaiah from O&BPuck sitting in the house. Holy smokes! Oh my gosh, are we a little bit excited? We're a little bit excited. Hey, we had to have Isaiah step in for the great Lance. He's out on vacation, big man out on vacation. So we had the next best thing, Isaiah from O&BPuck stepping in. How are you doing, bro?
I'm doing great, man. Getting ready for an exciting season of hockey.
Exactly. Listen, tell the folks where we can find you, how we can get your great stuff, where we can listen to O&BPuck, and how we can follow you.
Yeah, well, you can follow the O&B PuckCast at O&BPuck, at O&BPuck on Twitter. We have a Facebook page. You can check us out on YouTube. Just put it in there, O&B PuckCast, and you'll find us. And we're on 12 different platforms from Apple, SoundCloud, you name it. We're on it. We got all these places to give us a follow. So, and you can follow me if you care to. I'm at Isaiah, ISAIAH _520. Isaiah, don't forget that _ 520.
All right. Well, thanks very much for joining us, man. And we are going to get right into the thick of it because we got a lot of stuff that's going to be happening here real soon with the club. And we're talking about Philadelphia Flyers rookie training camp. And we're also talking about regular training camp and then obviously preseason. And then the season's going to soon be starting here real soon, too. So there's a couple things I want to get into. And one of the first things I want to say, first of all, is thank you very much for hopping on and taking the time out to do this.
Oh, sure.
So,
anytime.
You got it. All right. So we got rookie training camp coming up here, and we have the list of folks that have been invited to camp. And I would really like to know what your thoughts are on the defense this coming season, based off of the young folks that have been invited to rookie camp. And then we'll get into some of the other things later, but just based off of the young guys that have been invited to rookie camp, the Zamulas, those type of players that are now coming into the rookie camp. I really want to know what your thoughts are on this defense this coming year.
Well, are you referring to the starting six for the Philadelphia Flyers, or you're talking about the fate of a couple different players that may be floaters in between the AHL, NHL, or perhaps players like what's his name, Jackson Vanderleest, that are actually vying for a chance to get some kind of contract?
Yeah,
even if he has to go back and play more junior.
Exactly, and or maybe the Cam Yorks. And or maybe, you understand what I'm saying? Look, we
they're all
know,
in different situations. Yeah.
Exactly. But I just want to know kind of what your take is on the young guys that the Philadelphia Flyers have that potentially are on the cusp, and then all of the folks that were brought in.
Well, I think when you look at what happened last year, it was an outright disaster. And we've said Matt Niskanen's name so many times. I mean, at this point, he's gone. He's retired. In fact, I think they even knocked on his door this past offseason just to make sure. Hey, we'll give you a third pairing spot. It's over. So, well, I think what the Flyers were looking to do was to kind of recreate that synergy between Ivan Provorov on the first pair with a right-handed veteran who was known for really being a good decision maker, someone who could come in with and give you a calm shift, change momentum, either lift it for his team or calm down and be like a cooler for a team that is in trouble, like the Flyers were so often last year. And then on the second pair, I think they were looking for someone to bang bodies a little bit, someone who had a big toolbox in terms of being able to complement Travis Sanheim, who they decided to keep. And then on the third pair, that's where decision making came in, where they thought to themselves, what do we want to do? We have Justin Braun. We want to keep him around. He was probably our best defenseman last year in terms of maxing out his ability and being the best he could be. If you
Okay, yes, I agree.
Right. Okay. And, Ivan Provorov clearly has a much higher ceiling at this stage of the game, but did he come close to matching that? No. Ivan Provorov looked like Robin to Niskanen's Batman, and hopefully that's more or less he's the complementary on the first pair. He's good enough to be that guy. So when you look at how they're set up now, you look at players like York and Zamula that are the heir apparents, and then you have somebody like Travis Sanheim who's only on a 2-year deal. Yeah. And you have to figure they're saying, hey, Travis, you got to earn it. You're going to walk your way to a UFA. And we may be in a spot in a couple of years when you're ready to go where York and Zamula are going to, usher you out the door. He might be a trade chip for a center that the Flyers may need for all we know. So when you look at what is going on right here, they bring in Keith Yandel and decide, I think they want, with the lack of, the experience of Cam York, just had a few games in garbage time, basically a cup of coffee. Igor Zamula, they want to give more time to muscle up a little bit. If he gets as big as Isaiah, he'll get there. No, I'm only kidding.
Oh, look at them guns. Oh, yeah,
it's nothing now. But no, and believe me, it's all glutes and hams and quads anyway. But you don't. If you're a young hockey player, remember, you got to concentrate on the lower body and the core. But anyway, bums like me look at the arms all day.
You're speaking the truth, though, because it's
it is.
It is.
No, Zamula's getting stronger, and he's a thin type, so it's going to take time. He's built a lot like Sanheim, but he does. Yeah. We were talking with Dan Silver on our special show, The Return of Dan Silver, our latest show on the O&B PuckCast, and we were talking about
Spotify, by the way, too.
Spotify, it's another place we go. Very popular format these days, and we were talking about how he has a nasty edge, even though he's not the biggest guy. He's long and rangy.
Yeah.
And as he gets stronger, he's very good hockey sense. He makes the game easier with how he thinks it. And York is like the model of efficiency. So you look at the rest of the kids that are coming in, like Hogberg is another guy. He's more of projects to be like a third pair efficient player who maybe could play with somebody who's more physical and could really round out a nice third pair down the road. He got it together a little bit, and he actually committed himself, according to Brent Flair, if I remember correctly, more to doing things off ice that he had to do if he wants to step into the NHL at some point. And if he advances to a certain level, he might be a call-up this year at some point. So I'm talking about Linus Hogberg. But guys like Millman are young. They need to go back to juniors. And I mentioned Jackson Van der Leest. He's just a big guy. He might be another Boris Volabik, just a big guy who never really quite made it. But he's big. He's like, 6'6", 235.
235, yeah. Like, hey, that's a big cat. So.
Yeah, he's a pretty decent straight line skater, but a lot like other players of his ilk, doesn't really have that lateral mobility, and that might keep him as an AHL player, if he even makes the pros at all. It might be an ECHL guy. And the rest of these other players, I mean, Wyatt Wiley, he played with the Phantoms last year, so I don't know what his ceiling is. He's right-handed, so that gives him an advantage. But I have a feeling if Ronnie Attard is ever signed by the Flyers, which is anticipated, that he would kind of bump Wyatt Wiley as the top right-handed defensive prospect, in the Flyers system. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what I was going to say. But that's why I wanted to get your take on this, because when you look down through this roster of defensemen that are being invited to this rookie camp, and there's nobody there with the exception of Cooper Zach, that's under 6'1", right? And as far as I'm concerned, when you have that size in defensemen, and I'm going to say the average weight here on these guys is 190. Okay, that to me, that's pretty good. That's pretty decent for a young group of guys to have that average size.
Yeah,
okay?
I mean, I should mention that one of their better prospects on defense is a smaller guy, Emil Andre, a guy they drafted last year, and I think he's a little smaller and shiftier along the lines of a York.
Yes.
Your point is well taken, nonetheless.
Yeah. And so that's what I think is going to be the biggest difference I think we're going to see here, especially in these young guys coming up, is that they're a little bit more on the larger side. With, there's a couple of exceptions, obviously, of course, but I'm very interested to see how Cam York handles this camp and what he looks like coming into camp. I'm very interested to see how Zamula is going to look and how they're going to play. We saw flashes of Cam when he came up and played with the big club last year, right? And he was that type of player that you were talking about to pair with Provorov, that slow it down, teaming in Desjardins type player where he would get the puck on his stick, right? And he would skate it a couple of strides and take that 2-3 seconds, and you could just feel the game just slow down for them, right? They were just like, all right, surveying the ice. This guy's open, quick pass.
Right.
Right.
And
okay, and that's exactly how Timonen played. That's how Desjardins played, and that's how exactly those type of players are. And that's exactly the type of player that Provorov needs, because we found out that Provorov is not the quarterback of the power play, and he needs that type of player because he is only at best a 1B, in my opinion. I'm not taking anything away from him at all. The fact that he chews up ice time, the fact that he is so good in multiple situations, but they put him in situations where they shouldn't have last year, in my opinion, and that made things bad for him.
Well, I think from that vantage point, I think last year was kind of like it brought out being a 2015 draft pick, and last year was a 21 year. Everything's kind of truncated, so it all comes out in the wash, I think. But what your conclusion is, and it's one actually Chris Turian was talking about even this time last year, talking about he's just not that guy. Like you're saying, it doesn't make him a bad player. You want to have when you draft, when is he drafted 8th overall in 2015, I believe it was.
Yeah.
Something in that range. And if you can get someone who's good enough to play on the first pair, and he's more Brad McCrimmon than Mark Howell, that's okay. But he's gonna, we all miss Beast, God rest his soul. But but he's a conditioning wonder. He's a powerful skater, but he just doesn't have quite the hockey IQ that we were hoping he would have, and he's not that level of player. So he's a complimentary first pair player. So you get a guy for the next 6 years. With like Ryan Ellis, and here we are. We're back, hopefully, where we were in 20. And I think Ryan Ellis is actually even a better player in many respects in terms of skill-wise than Matt Niskanen. And hopefully it'll work out. But with regard to what Cam York can be, let's see him at the pro level in the AHL a little bit more.
I agree.
Keith Yandel is going to play. Keith Yandel is going to be better on the power play right now than even Cam York, even though I like Cam York, his potential. But look, we got burned last year, waiting on kids, or not waiting on kids, but counting on kids to get it done. And what was this offseason? This offseason was a study in, hey, get the veterans, make the kids totally outplay them to get a spot. And that's, I think, where we're at.
Yeah, no. I agree with you 100%, because see, this is exactly why I love listening to you guys talk. I love listening to your shows, man, because you always seem to have this really deep, in-depth knowledge of really what's going on here with this team. And it shows in what you say and the answers that you're giving me here on these questions. Because when you look at what this team could be with Cam York, I agree. I think he doesn't have to be rushed. They got enough players now to where Cam York can spend that 25, 35, however many games down there in the AHL and the Phantoms and be that number one guy. Show me that you can be that number one guy and do it down in the AHL, right?
Well, I mean, that's what I think Chuck Fletcher and even the new hire, Mike O'Connell, was talking about. I mean, you want to try to avoid situations where you feel like, you shortchange the player 30 or 40 games that they would have been better off playing in the AHL, getting in big minutes and developing, learning, making mistakes when the lights aren't quite so bright.
Exactly.
And then, it gives them a little more time to catch their breath, and they don't take shortcuts to get a result. You want to go through the process, and that's what development is all about. If you're just focused on a result, you could skip different steps that could help the development in your game. So you're better off making your mistakes in the AHL, correcting them, and going through that slow process where it becomes muscle memory to do it the right way, instead of just totally becoming that guy like a Robert Haig. For as much as he did certain things well, he was the bank the puck off the glass kind of guy. And you can only take so many of those players in your lineup.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's exactly right. You know what I'm saying? And we've said this on the show many times before, that rushing players is never a good thing. And when you allow those players to do that, grow up, learn, and here's the best thing too, right? They're going to learn from Jason Smith and Ian LePerriere down in the Phantoms, right? And they're going to learn how to be good professionals. They're going to learn how to play that game the right way, the way they're supposed to play, right? You see what I'm saying? So I'm all for that. I'm the same thing with like Tyson Forster. You know what I mean? And wisdom. I would love to see all three of those players spend like the first half of the season down at the Phantoms.
Well, I can tell you this much. I think the plan with Wisdom, who's coming off a surgery, I think it was his shoulder.
Yeah, he's out till like.
He's ticketed for the OHL. I think he's going to play with Kingston, with Shane Wright. He's going to be on it. Shane Wright is supposed to be a very highly drafted player, one of the best players in the CHL. This year he's going to be very, very high in the 22 draft. So I can tell you with certainty that the plan for Wisdom, like it would be for Millman, it's time to go back to the CHL. That even though he impressed, the opportunity to play with Shane Wright, a great player like that, be his winger, and B, possibly even make it to the WJC, possibly, and get an invite there is an experience that you want him to have.
Exactly. And that's the other thing, too. You want them to get that experience. You want them to get those invites so that they can play on those big stages, so they can play in those big games, so they can get that experience without costing the team. I mean, without having them to learn on the team's dime per se, like he's not learning on the Flyers dime. He's learning on the junior team's dime, basically. You know what I mean? Which is what they're supposed to do.
Well, sure. Yeah. Not only you get the contractual benefits, but you also get the experiential benefits. And the last thing we need is a guy who's going out there playing 8 minutes a night. We've been through this enough times. In the Hextall era, Hextall's flawed rebuild and the malaise that set over the team had a lot to do with the fact that everybody, quote, wants to play the kids. The problem is the kids weren't ready.
Yeah.
The kids, and then, they get all disheartened, and then you yo-yo them up and down from the AHL to the NHL. And that's it was a mess. So we're out of that. And I think the Flyers are off and running for this 22 season.
Okay. I agree. I agree with you 100%. And one of the other questions that I wanted to ask you is, what are you looking forward to the most coming out of this rookie training camp?
Well, I think you want to see some of these kids separate themselves, like Wade Allison. And you want to see York, Allison, Zamula, players of that ilk show themselves to be above the fray. They've been to a couple camps now. They should be graduating from these camps and looking like future stars. Morgan Frost as well. Morgan Frost has played, I think, 4 periods in 19 months. So he's going to have a reacclimation process. Yeah. And that's basically it. I don't think Matthew Strome is going to come out and start skating like Yvan Cournoyer anytime soon. So he might be fated to be a career AHLer, and maybe with a different organization. We love the skill set. But we're also going to have another story. Is a guy like Samu Tuamala. Is he going to go play in the CHL or the AHL? And looking at him and his profile, I would think that he'd be better off in Canadian juniors.
That's kind of what I was thinking too. You know what I mean? Just based off of, I know he's more of a diminutive player, but I think him doing that would give him a better opportunity to display his skill set and get that experience as well too. So that's exactly what I was thinking with him as well too. And I'm also very much looking forward to seeing exactly what some of these players who have now been in the system, like Isaac Radcliffe, that need to kind of, it's time now, Morgan Frost, put up or shut up. You know what I mean? It's time now that you've been to multiple camps. You need to make it so that the coaches say, we got to keep these guys around.
Well, I think Morgan Frost is controversial. When you haven't played as much as he would have liked, he missed so much time with the injury. And we listened to the interview with the Brent Flair talking about his shoulder was already out. So when he heard it, it wasn't quite what it looked to be. They were thinking about cutting him and getting this thing repaired. And then he kind of had that collision. And he said the collision wasn't as bad as the fact it just kind of went out on its own almost, So it's almost like you got to give him another year of grace. So he's drafted in 2017. So I think with him, he just wants to establish himself as a clear NHL prospective talent. We see the talent. To me, and I was talking about this with Dan on our last show, it's whether that talent prospectively will play out at center and they should try to max that out because the need is there, or whether he might actually in the future end up being a better pro on the wing, taking some of that responsibility from him and allowing him to be a playmaking winger. And he could still function on the power play it wouldn't matter as much. He could still take faceoffs. But I think at this juncture, they have to decide whether or not he can be an NHL center. But first, staple yourself in as an NHL prospective player. Yeah. The talent is there. It's just, has he grown enough and is that shoulder healthy? That's where I'm at with him. Maybe I'm like about 6 months behind. A lot of people would think, hey, he's got to prove he belongs with the Flyers, or, let him go,
Well, see, like I'm kind of in that same kind of boat with you. Like I'm kind of looking at it like I'm taking a hands-off kind of back away look at it, because he did kind of get hurt last year and he did have that year where he was hurt. You know what I mean? And from what I understand, he hit the weight room and, put some poundage on and did the right things that you want a player to do in the offseason, especially coming off of a season-ending injury and things of that nature. So I'm looking for a player like him to take that next step, to be that legit NHL prospect that's going to be the guy that's going to, make it out of camp kind of thing. You understand what I'm saying? So I'm with you on that. What do you think about the destroyer, Elliot Deonay? I mean, this is going to be his, second camp now, right?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, he was drafted in 2020. Listen, they love the kid. He's just he's all hockey 24/7, and I've heard really good things about him off the ice in terms of asking questions and being very interested in every aspect of what it's like to be in the NHL. He clearly, he's still undersized, but you wouldn't expect somebody drafted, 130th overall, 5th round draft pick to be to be as productive as he was. That caught him off guard. But I wouldn't have hopes in that regard. I mean, he could be another Lindblom and end up being somewhat of a scorer. And I hope Oscar can get back to where he was in 20 before the illness. But with Denoyer, look for him to have a nice year again in the queue where he's playing, and I think he's at Halifax. And so far so good with him. But you want to see, what you really want to see somebody like a player like that is a progression from last year.
That's what I'm talking about. Did he learn
his lesson? Some of the things that they told him, and they made a list, and he checked off the boxes in that regard.
See, that's the thing that I'm going to be looking for in this camp is, did some of these players, because let's face it, the young players from the Flyers regressed last season. Okay.
Yeah, outside of Farabee, yeah.
That's okay. Outside of Farabee, all of the young players regressed, and a lot of the veterans, some of them played way beyond what they should have been playing, right? Because a lot of people weren't stepping up, right? So we're all in agreement to that. So now we got to see it. Now we got to see, all right, last year was last year. What are you going to show me this year? Right. That's what I'm looking forward to. And I want to see these guys take that next step by doing those things, checking off those boxes, like you said, that the coaches said, hey, maybe this off season you should do this and this and this and this and this and this. And they come back and they're in shape and they're ready to go. Hey, all right. Thank you very much for doing this, 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 and this. See how much better you are. See how things are. I mean, hey,
yeah, I mean, it is right, and a lot of that is off the ice stuff. I mean, ultimately, yeah, you can improve your skill, and that'll look nice in a rookie camp. But frankly, I mean, what's going to matter is if we're here in December and somebody checked a whole bunch of boxes, and then we see a regression on the ice, it's not going to mean too much. So
exactly,
it really on the ice and the results are what counts, fashion, or what ultimately is what is going to matter. If these guys are going back to the respective junior teams or what have you,
I'm with you on that. Now, of all of these guys now that have been invited, have been to camp and everything else like that, and all the folks that we've talked about, we didn't even touch on the goalies, but
yeah.
Of all the young players coming out of this camp, is there that one or two players that you think is going to be the shine, that's going to be the star, that's going to be the one, that's going to be that Simone Gagne, that's going to be that one that's going to make the team, or, whatever you want to call it? Do you feel there's a player like that that's going to make it out of this camp?
Well, I mean, we're expecting Allison to make the team, right?
Okay.
So, he's going to be there. He's going to be a leader in that group, like I talked about earlier. But listen, it's all Morgan Frost and Cam York. I mean, and Zamula is kind of like a dark horse there.
Okay.
But they're going to have to really outplay the competition, specifically Derek Brassard or Keith Yandel. Keith Yandel's got that streak going. And look, AV knows him. AV knows he can run a power play. Cam York is almost certainly going to be a Lehigh Valley Phantom.
Yep.
And that's the way it should be, really, unless, of course, we have an injury or Yandel wakes up one day and says, hey, you know what? I really can't play anymore. I mean, that's happened.
But, stranger things have happened,
Yeah, the Flyers hired Wayne Cashman to coach the team. I mean, what the heck? Let's drink to that. I'm sorry, it's bad taste. But anyway, listen, it was a bad move, a disaster, and it is what it is. But I think that it was funny though. But
because I remember those years, that's why it was funny. Oh, yeah. Anyway,
what was it? Is that the year they got Jeff Hackett, or that was another fiasco?
Yes, it was.
Oh boy, I'll tell you, Bob Clark.
Oh my gosh.
It was hit or miss,
See, why are you bringing up all these names? I thought I
can't help it. Well, half a century following this team, more than half a century. Shows on my face. Anyway, all the worry lines. Anyway, so I really think the plot is this: Morgan Frost can basically, it would be an upset, but if you want to go out on a limb and say if anybody could move the needle, it would probably be, even after all the time off, Morgan Frost, if he is absolutely outstanding, could unseat a guy like Brassard. And Brassard can play wing, so it's no big deal. Brassard could be an extra player, again, so it's no big deal. Again, though, you have another player who AV has a comfort level with, so I don't think it's very likely. Yeah, so I think that's really it. I mean, we're all interested to see what Samuel Ersan can do, because he's coming over from Sweden. He's probably their best goaltending prospect. You referred to that earlier. But again, until we get to the games, we don't know anything.
Exactly.
He'll get beat on a fancy move by a guy like Frost. Who cares? What happens in the game in the structure? And it will be very interesting to see. You mentioned earlier, I didn't get a chance to talk about Jason Smith. I am so excited that you get a solid pro So now, you know, you have Shel Samuelson. He's more like in the scouting development area.
Yeah,
And
but he played too.
right, he played too. And Jason Smith, you know, again, he was so important in '08 in kind of coalescing a group of disparate pieces, and he helped. It was an intangible, and it was such a fun year. And when the way he got elected captain said a lot, even though he wasn't as good as he had been like 5 years earlier for Edmonton.
Yeah.
You need that sometimes.
Yeah.
And I think the Flyers, when you talk about the parent team's roster, everything about the moves they made speaks to that as well. So I think that'll be a good thing for the Phantoms, certainly.
That's a perfect lead in too, because that's exactly what I want to talk about next. And look, we're all excited about this rookie camp, and we can't wait for it to get rolling and everything like that. And that's all fine and great. But look, the next thing that I really want to get into here is this. The Flyers made a lot of moves in the offseason. Okay. And we're not talking about the draft or anything like that. With the huge turnaround this offseason, when it comes to personnel, my main concern is, will all of these former captains and associate captains be able to come together on this team under AV? Right?
Well, yep.
So given that this is a full season now, full camp, normal schedule, you know, I'm expecting things to be much different this season, you know, as far as like practice goes and time off and stuff like that. What do you think about as far as the fact that there's been so much turnover with the Flyers this year, the fact that there's been a wave of leadership, a wave of culture change that has taken place here on the Flyers? I mean, that has to impress you to some extent, yes?
Well, absolutely. We talked about it repeatedly on the O&B PuckCast about how there was a problem. They had no culture. Bob Clark referred to it last show. Bob Clark was talking with Zach Kinderchuk, Boris's son, the great third line center for the Flyers back in the Bullies days. And he asked Bob Clark, what is this team? What is their culture? What's their identity? And he said, I don't know that we really have one. And in Bob Clark's inimitable style, he hesitates, he hems, he haws, and he comes out with, well, I don't know if we actually have one. And it's like, I mean, that's it right there.
That's it.
And I think the Hextall years were kind of like a study in malaise. It's like, we're not going to win this year. Okay, so if we're not going to win this year, what the hell are we doing out on the ice? And you can only do that so long. That's why really the way to go when you do a rebuild is to retool on the fly. Unless you have a bunch of guys like the Bruins were able to draw back on a Stanley Cup winning experience, and you could fill in pieces as they fall down. What happened with the Flyers? Even in Bully years, they rebuilt with Linsman and Ben Wilson, and Holmgren became players, like more like a Dornhofer. He outgrew his Schultz replacement to become more of a Dornhofer 30-goal player in 79, 80. They had retooled. The Bruins did the same thing from 2011. Now, of course, that is all run its course. But the Flyers didn't do that. They didn't have that. They didn't have enough veterans who'd done something, who accomplished anything. So the retool on the fly wasn't going to work. You got to tear it down. So what happened by going in between those two scenarios, that a malaise set in and the locker room was dead. The expectations just weren't there. And the guys who they were paying like all-stars and top 50 players weren't that anymore.
Exactly.
At least Giroux isn't that anymore. And it just all kind of ran out of time. So now what you have is a circumstance where some of the other kids are going to be able to take a bigger bite. Hopefully, like Farabee can keep it up. Konechny can bounce back. Oscar, who, has the right attitude, and if he's physically up to it, should be a 20-goal scorer and a solid two-way player. You got rid of the mopey guys like Nolan Patrick and the kind of in-and-out veterans who were good performers, but weren't really great players in Jake Voracek. And he wanted a change. He asked for a trade. That came out. So, hey, what we needed was some sunshine and leadership. We got sunshine and leadership with Cam Atkinson. You have a guy in Rasmus Ristolainen, who was deployed, too high in the lineup. I think he's a third pair level player, but look, he's getting paid $5.4 million. He's got a lot of tools. He doesn't think the game that well, but he runs around a little bit, tries to hit people a little too much. Hopefully, with a better coaching and a more stable situation, and maybe they can look to a guy like Ryan Ellis, like this is how you should do it.
Yeah, or playing with better players.
Well, I don't know. Sanheim is, I don't know. Sanheim is right there with Darlene, but I'd rather have Darlene, to be honest with you. But
all right, but I get what you're saying.
Yeah, Darlene's a young kid, but so I think you look at that. And then you throw in on the forward lines a guy like Atkinson, and you bring back a guy like Nate Thompson, who's like a kind of like a safety valve. If the team's in a slump and they're getting really killed on the penalty kill, you pop him in the lineup. If he doesn't play, no big deal. You're going to get the same performance out of him if he plays 70 games, if he plays 25 games.
Exactly.
Nate Thompson at this point is Nate Thompson, and anybody will take him off your hands too if you need to. Right? Exactly. And then you have emerging players like who are more mature as young players. Remember, Pittsburgh did that when they had their back-to-back cup years. They had kids coming up from what is there? Hershey? Is there? Or no, it's Wilkes-Barre. Is there?
Wilkes-Barre. Yeah,
Wilkes-Barre. Is there? Okay. So they had kids coming up that were 23 and 24 years old. Well, we have Wade Allison. We have Tanner Lashinsky. These are kids that have a lot of experience. Plus, you have some guys that have more experience as a pro. That have grown, like Connor Bunneman. So, you put it all together, and you have a lot of these guys like Ellis and Ristolainen and Cam Atkinson, like you said, who had letters on the sweater. And hopefully, when they hit a rough patch, they won't go through this panic and they won't get beat 9-0 or 8-3. They'll hang in there. Even if they lose, they'll be competitive and they'll stay within their structure. Because the one success that remember from the 2020 season is the Flyers were a very well-structured team. Yeah. They weren't necessarily great in an area, but they were very consistent once they hit their stride. And they were pretty consistent in the top 10 in each of the special team areas, if I recall correctly. And that's obviously a big area for improvement. And again, the personnel that they brought in seem to address that as well.
I agree with you 100%. And that's why I mean, speaking of all these vets that they brought in, clearly there's going to be some that aren't going to play. I mean, you're going to have this mix and match of players with these young guys that might make it harder for some of these other things. You think it's going to mesh well? I mean, what do you think about some of with some of the vets that we have and then some of the young guys we have? What do you think about how that's going to mesh well with this team?
Well, like I said about a guy like Derek Brassard or even Keith Yandel, especially when he gets he passes Doug Jarvis for his Ironman record. I mean, let's say, everything's on the table for this year. I mean, Chuck is going all in on this team, and in this offseason, just like Homer did almost in like 2007, right? So they're here to win now in the next 2 years. And Giroux didn't even sign a contract. That could be in aid of him waiting and seeing what they're going to be like. But I think the veterans know their role. Now, the veterans that are in their prime still, like Couturier, he's a lifer. He's here for 8 years at 7.75, so he's going to be here. They obviously like Joel Farabee for signing him up, and they think
and we like him,
right? He's a veteran now. And a guy like Nick O B PuckCast, he could be out of here. I mean, he knows he's got a lot to prove. He can't take the penalties that he took last year because he's got 3 or 4 kids that are ready to take his place.
Exactly.
And Yandel knows his role. Even Lawton. Lawton is a guy they signed, which I didn't really care for. I love Scotty. He's a great kid. He cares. He works hard. He doesn't think the game well, and he can't hold down the third-line center role. So if he's just a third-line winger or a fourth-line center, maybe in a pinch he can be a second-line center. Okay, he could be a trade chip. In spite of their loyalty to him, and they might need to because listen, they got Martin Jones behind Carter Hart. And that's the one thing you haven't mentioned. I mean, Carter Hart is the alpha and omega of this team. I mean, that's it. Because if they're counting on Martin Jones to rebound after 3 crap years in San Jose, I'm sorry. If Martin Jones can play 30 decent games and give them like 9-10 goaltending and more to the point, make momentum saves, I'll be happy. Okay.
Yeah. Well,
I'll look up to the sky and say thank you. But it is really on Carter Hart, and don't fool yourself. They wanted to bring in a better backup than Martin Jones. They just ran out of money. Okay.
Yeah.
It wasn't a
Yeah.
perfect offseason for
I
Chuck
agree.
Fletcher. I love the effort, like Dan said. Okay. But were there other moves that could be made? Sure.
Sure.
And so this is the big area of vulnerability. So that's the veteran who, if you want to talk about a veteran who's got to come through, if Martin Jones, under the tutelage of Kim Dillabaugh, can make somewhat of a comeback, it takes a lot of pressure off of Carter Hart. But I'm not holding my breath on that one.
See, and that's exactly. I was trying to save the best for last, but you already beat me to it. So we're good, man. We're good. Because that's exactly what, because that's this whole thing revolves around whether or not two things. One, can Martin Jones play 30 games and win 80% of those 30 games? Right? He needs to be able to be that goalie that we can go, hey, we're playing a back-to-back against Pittsburgh. We're playing a back-to-back against Boston. We're playing a back-to-back against Toronto. He needs to be able to play those games. He can't be the guy that we just shove in there against Anaheim or the teams that, the Flyers should be winning against, quote unquote. You see what I'm saying? So I am so with you on that. And the second thing that needs to happen, I think, is Carter Hart. If Carter Hart doesn't settle down, be the guy that he was or what he needs to be, and stop the bloody puck, then it doesn't matter who's wearing the A's and who's wearing the C's, and we're getting a much higher draft pick next year, because that's kind of where I think this is the keystone for this entire team, is exactly what you said. It has to be Carter Hart, has to have that rebound season, and Martin Jones also has to be a rebound season and be able to win 80 to 85% of those 30 games that he's going to have to play.
Well, I mean, it might be a lot, 80, 85%, but look, I get what you're saying. I mean, the main thing, though, from the net one out, they have to have the structure that they had in 2020 or something similar, and that they have to play AV's system. And they're better suited to do that. They have a couple vulnerability, spots of vulnerability at 3C. I think that D4 position is going to be very interesting all year.
Yeah,
I think when you look at Ristolainen, you're talking about a guy who's going to be, it's like feast or famine. I think to try to even out what he is might take away from his game. So at least, you're going to have interesting subplots. I'll say that much.
That's a good way to look at it for sure. I think making Ristolainen be that lower line player instead of where he was forced to play in Buffalo, I think is what really hindered him, and that made him into where it was a detriment. He wasn't playing to his strengths, and he was forced to play something that he wasn't. Much like what Provorov kind of did last year. He was kind of forced into that number 1D guy, and he just isn't. And it's not a knock against Risto at all. It's just that's not his game.
Well, they never let him develop.
Exactly.
That's the problem. You get guys like him, and Zach Bogosian, who he ended up in Buffalo. He also ended up in Tampa. But guys like him and Luke Shen, I could go on and on. I mean, people have probably heard me talk about this. Look, these kids take longer. Defensemen in this game, when you can't clutch and grab, ever since the rule changes, it takes so much longer. It always took longer for defensemen to develop, but they lasted longer. But now it's even tougher, and it's so that we are taking in a player who is going to have to, is somewhat of a reclamation project in that regard.
That's a good way to put it. Reclamation project. It's going to be some growing pains. There's going to be mistakes made. There's going to be some things that are going to happen during the game that's going to make the coach a little bit upset. Probably the fans too. You know what I mean? So all this being said, do you feel that there's maybe, and this is going to be my last point right here, and this is what I wanted to get to.
Yeah.
Do you feel that maybe this year's team, just feels a little different? I'm not trying to drink the Kool-Aid, or, you know what I'm trying to say, but it just seems like certain things happened this year. Certain things took place this year as far as how the team was built and everything like that. What do you think the chances are of this team? I mean, seriously. I feel something maybe a little bit different about this team this year that I didn't feel in the last couple of years. But where do you think? Where do you think we're on? Do you think this team's got a shot? I mean,
Well,
gosh.
listen, there were a couple elephants in the room last year in terms of guys that didn't want to be here, and the quit factor, the lack of competitiveness, some of the intangibles that were obvious, and they were addressed. Virtually every acquisition seemed to address or check off a box in terms of want to, care, desire. What would this guy look like if the team's down 4-0? Is this team going to come back and at least make it 4-3, or is this headed towards 7-1? And I think last year it was the latter, and I think what they're going for this year is for the former. And that's a team that is much more competitive, tougher to play against, that doesn't, push the panic button, and it is not going to fall apart structurally. It's going to play AV system, and I think there's no doubt about it. And they're going to have more grind to them. And plus, they added a guy like Atkinson, who's going to want to take shots. Yeah. And if Allison makes the roster on a consistent basis, you're going to feed him. He's going to shoot. Okay, and that's been a big problem. It's Alphonse Gaston for way too long around here.
Yeah, right.
And then it goes into Jackie Mason.
Yeah, right. Oh my gosh.
The water was blue. Oh
my. See, this is why we have to have Marco or Isaiah on here more, because oh my God, do you hear this stuff? Come on. Come on. Look, I don't know. I do feel, though, that they've addressed a lot of things with this team. I was talking to my good friend from a certain channel who is the voice. But anyway, okay. I was talking to a good friend, and he said he felt exactly what you said, that the Flyers checked off a lot of those boxes. Hey, we need a 1A defenseman. Check that off, right? We need a fourth line defenseman. Check that off. We need a guy that can bang bodies. Oh, check that off. Hey, we need some offensive firepower that can be there and do the right things. Oh, check that off, right? But what he said was the only thing that they didn't check off was exactly what you said, as far as like Wade Allison or Cam Atkinson, guys that are shoot first, guys that are make the other team stand up and pay attention because this guy's on the ice, right? And he felt that the Flyers didn't necessarily address that box to be checked off, to where there's not that player on the ice that's that dangerous guy that, man, it's not when he's going to score, it's if he's going to score, or when is it going to be, or you know what I mean?
Well, guys like that are hard to find. It's one of the reasons they were probably looking at Tarasenko, because he could be that kind of player. But we uncovered the fact that that he might have had actually 4 shoulder surgeries, not 3.
3,
so,
yeah.
So, there was a risk there, and possibly both the Flyers and the Blues were kind of led on by Seattle as Ron Francis was figuring out what he was going to do. Supposedly there was a deal where Voracek and Tarasenko were going to be involved, and Seattle would extract something. So obviously it never happened. They made the one-on-one trade. For one trade with, with Columbus. But I think, look, how many guys like that are there in the league that are otherwise good players?
Or that are available.
Right. Patrick Laine is very expensive, but he's also kind of a mutt on the other side of the puck. Whereas a guy like Kyle Connor is a better overall player, and I'd rather have Kyle Connor at this stage. 2 years ago, I would have rather have had Laine. So it's tough to find those players. And listen, we'd love to have even a guy like Panarin. It's always good to have a player And I was just thinking about this when I was, considering what we were going to talk about tonight, because I knew, obviously you have an agenda, and we all have an agenda. No, but the Flyers don't have that player who other teams have to worry. Hey, we got to guard this area of the ice. We have to worry how are we going to stop him, and the resources to stop that player. Open up other things
for other
players. And you know who has it? And to this day, I still think are an otherwise pretty ordinary team, the Islanders. And Matt Barzal is the engine of that whole franchise, because that dynamic element, and he could score anywhere or he could set up somebody by making a great play.
Agreed.
And until they get that player, the Flyers are only going to win a cup by having the lunch pail approach like the Blues did a couple years ago.
Yeah. No, that's exactly what I was trying to get to. That's exactly what I wanted to try to convey as far as where you felt this team was at this point. And that's pretty much exactly how I feel. And that particular player may or may not be on the team as of yet. That might be one of those particular players that they pick up at the trade deadline or along the way, or it might become a player that's already in the system. Or, look, we've talked about stranger things could happen. So we're going to say stranger things could happen this year. But I agree with you. As long as the Flyers consistently are consistent, if they consistently can do the right things night in and night out, they will win more games than not. You know what I mean? And so that's kind of what I'm looking forward to as well. Isaiah, my man, thank you so very much for coming on here, bro. Thank you for giving us your great insight and all the great things that you have that's coming out as far as the information you have, the perspectives that you have, and all of the details that you have about these players, man. That's why I enjoy having you on, and that's why I enjoy talking to you. Why don't you tell the folks how we can follow you, how we can get you, and where we can get the great Isaiah from O&BPuck?
Yeah, it was my pleasure to come on. To hear my drivel. But you can follow the O&B PuckCast at O&BPuck, at O&BPuck on Twitter. And like I mentioned earlier, we have a YouTube channel, Facebook page. Check us out on one of 12 different podcast platforms, including Spotify, which apparently is your favorite, and Apple, SoundCloud,
that's where
Stitcher,
I listen to you on.
You name it. So, and then, of course, again, myself, I talk about a lot of things. I have a pharma and medical background, so you'll see a lot of that kind of stuff. And sports, I'm a big boxing fan. So anyway, I'm at Isaiah, ISAIAH _520 Isaiah. Don't forget the underscore 520. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you very much, folks. This is Isaiah from O&BPuck. He's the man, the myth, the legend, the standard is what we like to call it anyway. We would like to say a huge Hockey Writers Inc. salute to Jamie Baskow and the Flyers Nitty Gritty Group. Thank you very much for helping us out making Bleacher Reports 41 weeks in a row. Every time we put a show out, bang, it goes on to Bleacher Reports. So thank you very much to that. Really appreciate all that. If you'd like to follow us, you can check us out online. You can check us out on Twitter, on Facebook, on YouTube, Hockey Writers Inc. Check us out. We are all there for you. If you want to check us out online, it's www.steelflyers.com/link/Hockey Writers Inc. We will see you on the next show. Thank you all very much.